Walk into almost any bookstore in America and pick up whatever catches your eye. It could be a glossy new memoir, a school textbook, or an obscure history book that only 12 people have been waiting to read. There is a very good chance the publisher did not send that copy directly to the shelf. Somewhere between the printing press and your hands, it passed through the machinery of one intensely private Nashville family. That family is Ingram, and we are saving them for number 1 on this list. Before we get to how they built their empire, Tennessee has 7 other fortunes built from snack cakes, football, cigarettes, casino machines, overnight packages, truck stops, and hospitals. Let us start with the little girl whose face has quietly sold billions of cakes. Number 8. The McKee family. There is a real little Debbie, which immediately makes this story more charming than it has any right to be. The girl in the straw hat was Debbie McKee, the granddaughter of O.D. and Ruth McKee, and today she is not simply a face preserved on a cardboard box. She chairs the board of the family company that still puts her childhood portrait in grocery aisles across America. The story began during the Great Depression, when O.D. McKee sold 5-cent cakes from the back of a 1928 Whippet. In 1934, he and Ruth used the family car as collateral to buy a failing bakery near Chattanooga, then lived behind a sheet in the back because money was so tight. Most people would have called that a warning. The McKees treated it like temporary office decor. Their breakthrough came in 1960 when they began packaging individually wrapped snack cakes together in a family carton. O.D. needed a friendly name for the line, saw a photograph of 4-year-old Debbie in her straw hat, and decided she was now a brand. Her parents apparently did not know until the cartons were already being printed, which is one way to announce that your child has entered the consumer goods business. Those first oatmeal creme pie cartons sold more than 14 million cakes in 10 months, and Little Debbie eventually became America's leading snack cake brand. McKee Foods says it now sells more than 200 million cartons every year of just its 3 biggest products: oatmeal creme pies, Swiss rolls, and Nutty Buddy bars. The company also owns Drake's and Sunbelt Bakery, generates more than $1 billion in annual sales, and remains privately held in Collegedale, Tennessee. O.D. and Ruth passed the bakery to their sons. The 3rd generation moved into leadership, and the 4th is now entering the business. The family openly says it plans to remain private, which matters because so many familiar food brands eventually disappear into enormous conglomerates. Little Debbie did not. The face on the box grew up, took a board seat, and helped keep the bakery in the family. So the next time you open a Christmas tree cake and tell yourself you will have only one, remember that 4 generations of McKees are counting on your lack of discipline. Their empire is sweet and familiar. Our next family owns something much louder because on Sunday afternoons, tens of thousands of people show up wearing its colors. Number 7. The Adams family. The Tennessee Titans cost Bud Adams about $25,000 to launch in 1959. Today, Forbes values the franchise at roughly $6.3 billion. That is not a return on investment. That is a financial fairy tale wearing shoulder pads. Bud made his first fortune in oil and founded the team as the Houston Oilers, helping create the American Football League before its merger with the NFL. Decades later, after years of frustration over stadium negotiations in Houston, he moved the franchise to Tennessee. The team became the Titans, reached a Super Bowl, and turned into one of Nashville's most emotionally important assets. Buildings can be replaced. A football team becomes part of how a city sees itself. When Bud died in 2013, the franchise passed into a complicated family structure involving his daughters and the heirs of his late son. This is usually where relatives begin preparing a sale, because billions of dollars divided among family members can make Thanksgiving feel like a board meeting. Instead, Bud's daughter Amy Adams Strunk emerged as controlling owner in 2015 and made it clear that the team was staying with the family. She did not take the ceremonial owner route. She expanded the organization, became involved in major decisions, and pushed through the project that will define the family's next generation: a $2.1 billion enclosed stadium on Nashville's East Bank, scheduled to open in 2027. The Titans are contributing hundreds of millions, while the wider agreement unlocks surrounding riverfront land for parks, housing, streets, and redevelopment. That is where this stops being only a sports story. A team-shaped Sunday afternoon, But a multi-billion-dollar stadium district influences roads, restaurants, housing, and the skyline for decades. The football is the visible part. The land around it is the longer game. Bud paid the price of a modest house for an asset now worth more than many public companies. Amy inherited an ownership puzzle, consolidated leadership, and is using that appreciating asset to plant the family deeper into Nashville's physical future. You can question stadium subsidies or the team's decisions on the field, but the ownership strategy is difficult to miss. The Adams family controls the loudest property in Tennessee. Our next billionaire did the opposite. He moved to Franklin, avoided the spotlight, and built much of his fortune by buying the one asset that never sends a press release: land. Speaking of quietly buying the one asset nobody else is watching, there's a program someone on our team has been curious about called the Billionaire Brain Wave. It's a simple 7-minute audio built around theta brainwave research, the deep focus brain state linked to where big creative ideas come from. You put on headphones once a day, usually with your morning coffee, and that's the whole routine. It's a one-time $39. It comes with bonus guides on money habits and investing basics, and there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. So testing it costs you nothing if it's not for you. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to Franklin's most private fortune and the man behind it. Number 6. The Kelly family. Brad Kelly made $1 billion selling cigarettes, even though he has never smoked one. That contradiction is the first thing people remember about him, but it may not even be the strangest part of the story. Kelly grew up on a Kentucky farm, left college, and started buying property while he was still remarkably young. In 1991, he founded Commonwealth Brands, a discount cigarette company, then sold it 10 years later for $1 billion. That kind of check normally produces a yacht, a private equity firm, or a highly regrettable professional sports purchase. Kelly bought dirt. Forbes now estimates his fortune at around $1.4 billion and says he controls more than 500,000 acres stretching from Florida to Hawaii. He became one of the country's largest private landowners without turning himself into a celebrity land baron. He lives around Franklin, rarely gives interviews, and famously avoids email. If you want to reach him, apparently you must use a technology older than his tobacco company and call him. The properties are not all ordinary farmland. Kelly has supported conservation projects and kept rare animals on some of his holdings. In 2012, he also purchased Calumet Farm, one of the most famous names in American horse racing. Calumet had once dominated the Kentucky Derby before collapsing under previous ownership. Kelly restored the operation, and his horse Oxbow won the Preakness the following year. What makes him fit Tennessee is not a giant headquarters carrying his name. It is the quiet concentration of assets around a man who seems almost aggressively uninterested in being understood. A neighbor could pass him at a feed store and have no idea they were standing beside a billionaire who owns enough land to fill a small county. There is a lesson hiding in that. Selling the cigarette company created the fortune, but refusing to treat the sale price as spending money preserved it. Kelly converted a volatile consumer business into acreage, bloodlines, and long-term value. That is not flashy, but neither is soil, and soil has been making families rich for several thousand years. Kelly bought the ground beneath everything. Our next family began with something much smaller: one foosball table inside a college bar. Number 5. The Yarbrough family. John Yarbrough's first business model could fit on a cocktail napkin. He bought a foosball table, placed it in a bar near Tennessee Tech, split the money with the owner, and learned a lesson that would eventually make him a billionaire. If people keep using the machine, you keep getting paid. That table became the mental blueprint for Video Gaming Technologies, the company he founded in 1991. VGT supplied electronic gaming machines primarily to Native American casinos, and instead of merely selling equipment, it built recurring economics around machines that kept producing revenue. By the time Australian gaming company Aristocrat bought VGT in 2014 for $1.28 billion in cash, Yarbrough had taken the logic of a barroom game and scaled it across thousands of casino floors. This is where many founder stories end. The check clears, the yacht appears, and everyone suddenly develops a passion for vineyards. Yarbrough built a family office in Franklin, and became a patient investor across public stocks, private companies, real estate, credit, infrastructure, and natural resources. Recent estimates place his fortune at roughly $5.4 billion, meaning the money made after the sale became far more important than the original exit. One of the best details in this lineup is that he reportedly still keeps that first foosball table in his office. A multi-billion-dollar portfolio can make wealth feel abstract, reduced to charts and people saying allocation during lunch. The old table brings it back to one simple idea: own a useful machine, put it where demand already exists, and let thousands of small payments become something enormous. Yarbrough maintains an unusually low profile for someone with that much capital. There is no national consumer brand carrying his surname, and no public company requiring quarterly interviews. From Franklin, the family office can quietly own pieces of funds, buildings, businesses, and projects, while most neighbors remain unaware of the balance sheet nearby. That is the Tennessee pattern beginning to emerge. The state has plenty of visible celebrity, but some of its largest fortunes were built by people who understood that the best business can be the one customers use constantly without thinking about who owns it. Yarbrough charged the casino floor. Our next family charges the sky, the road, and almost every front porch in America. Number 4. The Smith family. Fred Smith did not merely create a successful delivery company. He changed what the word overnight meant to the global economy, and he did it from Memphis using an idea so expensive and operationally ridiculous that sensible people had every reason to reject it. While studying at Yale, Smith wrote about an integrated air and ground network that would move urgent packages through a central hub. The famous story says the paper received a C. What matters is that he built the system anyway. After serving 2 tours in Vietnam as a decorated Marine, he launched Federal Express with 14 aircraft serving 25 cities, then centered the network in Memphis because of its geography, airport access, and relatively favorable weather. The company nearly died. FedEx lost tens of millions, fuel bills piled up, and Smith once took its last $5,000 to Las Vegas, where he won about $27,000 at blackjack. That did not rescue FedEx. It bought another week. Sometimes a dynasty begins with brilliant strategy, and sometimes it also needs the founder to hit 21 at exactly the right moment. By the time Smith died in June 2025, FedEx had become an $87.7 billion global enterprise serving more than 220 countries and territories. Forbes estimated his fortune at $5.8 billion shortly before his death. More importantly for this story, the business has now entered a visible succession phase. Smith's estate and family holding company together reported about 7.5% ownership of FedEx in 2025 proxy materials. His beneficiaries already own part of the holding company directly, while his widow serves as co-executor of the estate. His son Richard sits on the FedEx board and now serves as Chief Operating Officer for International Operations and Chief Executive of the airline. FedEx is not family-controlled in the same way McKee Foods is. It remains a public corporation run by professional management. But the Smith family holds one of its largest individual positions. A son is helping shape operations, and the family's wealth remains tied to the company that made Memphis a logistics capital. Tourists visit Memphis for blues, barbecue, and Elvis, while every night a second city wakes up at the airport. Planes arrive, packages race through the sorting system, and Fred Smith's original idea turns darkness into a working shift. Most residents will never meet a Smith, yet the family's decision still dictates the rhythm of the city after midnight. The Smiths built the machine moving your packages. Our next family built the roadside empire that kept the people moving those packages fueled, fed, showered, and awake. Number 3. The Haslam family. The Haslam family turned one service station into $13.6 billion in sale proceeds, then spread its influence into politics, football, basketball, hockey, and soccer. Some families struggle to agree on one vacation home. The Haslams found room for several professional teams and a governorship. The story began in 1958 when James Haslam II paid $6,000 for a gas station in Virginia. That operation became Pilot, then Pilot Flying J, and eventually grew into more than 800 travel centers across North America. The brilliance was not just fuel. Pilot built a roadside ecosystem around the driver. Parking, food, showers, repairs, and the confidence that another functioning stop waited somewhere ahead. James passed the business to sons Jimmy and Bill, and the family kept expanding until Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway bought the company in stages. Across transactions completed between 2017 and 2024, Berkshire paid about $13.6 billion for Pilot. Forbes now estimates the Haslam family's fortune at roughly $16.4 billion. Pause on what happened next, because this is where the asset math gets interesting. The family no longer owns the business that created the fortune, but it did not simply scatter the cash. Jimmy and Dee Haslam own the Cleveland Browns and stakes in the Milwaukee Bucks and Columbus Crew. Bill Haslam, the former Tennessee governor, completed his purchase of a majority stake in the Nashville Predators in 2025. A family that once sold diesel beside the interstate now sits inside ownership groups across 4 major sports leagues. Bill also served as mayor of Knoxville and governor from 2011 to 2019, embedding the family name in public life while its private fortune expanded. Wealth, sports, politics, and development now meet in the same family network. The revealing choice is that the Haslams did sell. Many dynasties hold the original company forever because it becomes the family identity. The Haslams let Berkshire own the travel centers because cash could be moved into scarce, prestigious assets with long-term appreciation. There are thousands of gas stations. There are only 32 NFL teams. They traded an operating empire for liquidity and trophy assets while keeping their Tennessee base. That is not retreating from power. It is changing the form in which the power is held. The Haslams sold and diversified. Our number 2 family has repeatedly taken its company public, taken it private, brought it public again, and somehow emerged with nearly 1/3 of the business still in family hands. Number 2. The Frist family. If you have ever wondered why Nashville is filled with healthcare headquarters, start with the Frists. Before HCA, hospitals were often independent local institutions. Thomas Frist Sr., his son Thomas Frist Jr., and businessman Jack Massey looked at that fragmented system in 1968 and asked what would happen if hospitals scaled like a retail chain. The answer became Hospital Corporation of America, now HCA Healthcare. Centralized purchasing, professional management, shared systems, and standardized operations allowed it to expand rapidly. Today, HCA owns or operates about 190 hospitals and roughly 2,400 other sites of care across 20 U.S. states and the United Kingdom, with 2025 revenue of approximately $75.6 billion. The fortune is enormous. Forbes estimates Thomas Frist Jr. and his family at around $30.9 billion, making them financially the richest family in this countdown. HCA itself is worth close to $100 billion, and the 2026 proxy says the Frist Group owns approximately 32% of its shares. 32% of a company that size is an asset worth roughly $30 billion before taxes, debt, discounts, and other holdings. That is the math behind the fortune, and it helps explain why the family has never simply cashed out and disappeared. HCA has moved between public and private ownership more than once. In 2006, it was taken private in a roughly $33 billion leveraged buyout, then returned to public markets in 2011. Many founders would have been diluted into irrelevance somewhere in that process. The Frists came through the financial machinery still holding a position large enough to shape the future. Succession is already visible. Thomas Frist Jr. no longer holds an executive role, but his sons Thomas Frist III and William Frist sit on HCA's board, and family investment entities hold the stake across generations. His brother Bill Frist became a heart transplant surgeon and later U.S. Senate Majority Leader. The family name also sits on an art museum, a foundation, and medical education across Nashville. Financially, the Frists are number 1, and I want to be clear about that. But the title promise belongs to a family with a smaller fortune and a stranger kind of control, because the Ingrams do not own the words inside your book. They own the road the book must travel to reach you. Number 1. The Ingram family. Go back to the bookstore from the beginning and pull a title from the shelf. You will see the author's name, the publisher's logo, perhaps a review quote, and maybe a sticker from the store. What you will almost never see is the name Ingram, even though the company may have warehoused the book, printed it on demand, carried its metadata, sold it wholesale, packed the order, processed the return, or delivered the digital file. That invisibility is the entire point. Ingram Content Group is part of Nashville-based Ingram Industries, the private family company that also owns Ingram Marine Group. Forbes estimates Martha Ingram and her family are worth about $7.1 billion. The marine side operates roughly 5,000 barges and around 150 towboats across America's inland waterways, while the content side connects publishers to more than 40,000 bookstores, libraries, schools, and online retailers. One branch moves grain and industrial cargo. The other moves ideas printed on paper. The family somehow became a toll collector on both rivers. The book business began in 1964 when Ingram Industries acquired Tennessee Book Company, a school book depository. Bronson Ingram expanded into wholesale distribution, building infrastructure that let stores order enormous numbers of titles without buying directly from every publisher. A small bookstore could suddenly offer access to a catalog far larger than its shelves, while publishers gained a route into thousands of accounts. By the late 1990s, Ingram was so important that Barnes & Noble agreed to buy the book group for $600 million. Independent booksellers and industry groups protested because the country's largest bookseller would also control the distributors supplying competitors, while Amazon depended heavily on Ingram. Federal regulators prepared to challenge the deal, and in 1999 the companies abandoned it. That failed sale became one of the most important non-events in publishing. John Ingram said the book group was no longer for sale, and the family leaned into the advantage of remaining private. Bronson had believed private ownership created corporate patience, meaning the family could fund ideas for years without a quarterly shareholder revolt. Lightning Source proved the point. Ingram invested in print on demand when the economics were uncertain, and the operation reportedly lost money for 7 years. A public company might have killed it after 7 quarters. The family kept going, and Lightning Source became one of the world's largest print-on-demand systems, keeping obscure and backlist titles available without publishers filling warehouses with unsold books. So how much of America's physical book market does Ingram actually control? No audited public share exists because Ingram is private and the wholesale market has no accepted scoreboard. The strongest current trade estimate puts it at about 55% of U.S. wholesale volume after longtime rival Baker & Taylor retreated and entered bankruptcy. That is an estimate, not a company-certified figure, but Ingram is clearly the dominant U.S. book wholesaler, reaching tens of thousands of accounts. So no, the family does not literally control every book in America. A used copy or a book bought directly from a publisher may never touch Ingram. But choose a random new physical title from an independent store, library, school supplier, online seller, or small publisher, and the odds that Ingram appeared somewhere in the chain are remarkably high. Honestly, that is more interesting than the exaggeration. The family does not need to predict which novel becomes a bestseller. A blockbuster needs warehouses and fulfillment. A tiny press needs access to stores. An author with one order needs print on demand. A library needs catalog depth. Even competing retailers can rely on the same Nashville infrastructure. The Ingrams benefit from the movement itself. Succession explains why the system remains theirs. When Bronson died in 1995 at 63, Martha became chairman while sons Orrin and John stepped into leadership. Orrin now leads Ingram Industries, John chairs Ingram Content Group, and members of the next generation already work across the family organization and Nashville Soccer Club. Each generation has added a layer, from lumber and river transport in the family's earliest history to barges, book wholesaling, print on demand, digital distribution, and professional soccer. The businesses change, but the skill remains the same, moving something valuable from where it is to where it needs to be. A person can live beside the Ingrams in Nashville, attend a game at Giada's Park, order a book online, and pass a barge on the Cumberland River without realizing those experiences connect to one surname. There is no Ingram bookstore chain demanding attention. The family sits behind the companies you recognize. That is why they belong at number 1. The Frists have more money, the Haslams have more visible sports power, and the Smiths built the more famous logistics brand. But the Ingrams created a system so embedded in American reading that millions use it without knowing it exists. They do not own every book. They own something quieter and, in its own way, more powerful. The route from the people who make books to the people waiting to open them. And those were the 8 richest families shaping Tennessee. Which one of these fortunes surprised you most? Little Debbie's 4-generation bakery, Fred Smith's blackjack rescue, the Frist's $30 billion HCA stake, or the family quietly sitting between America's publishers and readers? Drop your pick in the comments, hit the like button if this changed how you see Tennessee, and subscribe to Global Status because we break down the families behind the systems everybody uses but almost nobody notices.